Good evening, everyone. Welcome, and thanks very much for joining us this little late hour. We have an hour, and there's not really any capacity to ask questions given the COVID restrictions. But if you do have a burning question, because I know my panellists, are going to be presenting some very interesting stories about their media organisations, you could email them to me, and we'll still try and take the last 10 or 15 minutes to answer questions. So my email address is jpark, J-P-A-R-K, at ipi.media. So that's not too hard. jpark at ipi.media. Okay, so I've been spending the last 12 months on behalf of the IPI Global Network talking with journalists, editors and media builders who are working at building the new local media ecosystem around the world. And I just want to say at the outset that is in large part due to the support of Craig Newmark Philanthropies and more recently the Friedrich Naumann Foundation. And I want to particularly thank them for making sure that we could all be here today. Talking to people around the world, I've learnt a lot, but three things in particular that have really inspired me. I guess, when I was thinking about how do we put this panel together? What would be the most interesting media to look at? And those things are, first, we all know that local media is the most disrupted sector of the media. And I think that's not really a secret. Secondly, despite, and probably because of that, it's also the sector where I think some of the most exciting innovation is happening in journalism. And thirdly, while that spotlight has really been on what's happening in the US and in in Western Europe, there's plenty of interesting stuff going on there. But to me, the really interesting innovation is what is happening outside of those regions. And, how that's driven by the really very local circumstances that they exist in. So I'm delighted to have been able to pull together this group of three passionate, smart women from Guatemala, India and South Africa to really help us understand, what we're missing out on, I guess, in this part of the world. And I guess, quietly and maybe a little cheekily, you can see also that a lot of the new building of media is being done by women. So I wasn't really sure how we'd pull it together, coming from all these different parts of the world with the COVID-related restrictions, because when we first proposed this, there were rules against all of us coming in. But anyway, here we all are. So please welcome, to my left is Dhanya Rajendran, who's the Editor-in-Chief of the News Minute in India, in southern India. Just immediately to my right is Carolina Alpirez, who's the founder and editor at Ojoconmipisto in Guatemala. And then we have Cheri-Ann James, who's the editor of the Daily Dispatch from the East Cape of South Africa. And so to start the conversation, I thought, why don't we, start where the business starts, which of course is with the journalism. And starting first with Cheri. So the Daily Dispatch is like one of Africa's oldest newspapers. And I think sometimes, it has such a proud history. It's been on the right side of history. And I think sometimes, like when you're transitioning something old to new, it's much harder than starting, something from scratch. And so to make that transition, you've had to kind of switch from being a journal of record for that state to really a focus on much more your local investigations and, the local, super local reporting. And so I wondered, how did you figure out that that's what was needed and that that's, what your audience were going to value?
Thank you for that. Oh, sorry. Thanks for that, Jacqui. Can I just put up a slide and then I'll just talk through it. So I'm from the Daily Dispatch, which is in the Eastern Cape in South Africa, and we are what people term a legacy media. This year we are turning 150, and so we have big celebrations that we are planning. I'm not sure if a lot of you know this, but we come from a very proud history at the Daily Dispatch where Donald Woods, one of our editors, many decades ago, had a very close relationship with Steve Biko, who was an apartheid activist and was basically being, we all know what happened during apartheid. And he went against what the regime at the time was saying and what was expected of the media, and really, I think, set the tone for where the Daily Dispatch was heading, and that was to courageous journalism. So that's the legacy that we've been working with over the last, I'm not going to say 150 years, but I would say like the last 70, 80 years. And our job now as the Daily Dispatch is how do we take that legacy forward? And we have sort of tuned into investigative journalism, but very local investigative journalism. So, we all have like the Panama Papers and all of that, that's what the big media institutions are looking at. But we look at what can we do to change the lives of our readers. And one of the biggest investigations we've done, and that I think really set the tone for where we were heading, that was looking at a hospital where there was one phone call that came through to the newsroom of a woman who had lost a baby. And then over the weeks, there were several other phone calls that came through. And there was one journalist who put it all together and said, there's something wrong at this particular hospital. And a team went undercover and really uncovered gross negligence and babies dying, and babies didn't need to die. And it was all because of simple things that weren't in place. That particular investigation speared massive interventions from national government to local government. And with that, we thought, hang on, this is where we can go as the Dispatch, where we can actually make a difference in the lives of our readers. And since then, we have just had numerous such big projects. Example, Hostels of Shame, where our children at schools were living in such dire conditions, it was worse than our prisons. And we went undercover, sort of exposed that and actually got them to change. So that really has been the legacy that we have been sort of advancing over the years. And it's very local. We have realized that there's a lot of national news and there's a lot of national media. And that's not where we're going to get our readers. That's not where we are going to attain readership. So we were thinking, let's focus on local journalism and let's focus on doing it really well. And that's how we've sort of positioned ourselves.
Yeah. And tell us a little bit then about the audience, who the community that you're serving, because it's a big area.
Yeah.
There's a rural, urban divide. How do you think about providing journalism and news and information for both all parts of the community?
Okay. I'm going to put up the slide now. You connected?
Can we switch to the slides?
Is it going on? Sure why it's not showing.
Is it going to work?
Stop. Sorry. Let's just try it again.
Let's come back. We'll get that sorted out, and we'll come back to that. So Dhanya, I want to talk with you now about The News Minute in southern India is really, I mean, well, Daily Dispatch is serving the Eastern Cape of South Africa. In comparison, the News Minute serves a community the size of
220 to 30 million.
Yeah, okay. So it's covering the 5 or 6 now southern states?
5 southern states.
Yeah,
yes.
5 southern states of India. And it's deliberately you established the News Minute in the south, away from the urban media centre of Delhi. And I mean, how did that, I guess, how did that shape your thinking about what you were trying to build with the News Minute and what you were trying to do? Who were you trying to serve?
Okay, so I was a television journalist for many years. I was on English, on an English channel called Times Now for around 8 to 9 years. And I became the bureau chief of Southern India. Southern India had 4 states then. Now it has 5 states. And it has a population of around 220 million. It's actually a smaller part of India compared to the rest, but it is the population that speaks English the most. Therefore, most news channels and newspapers would focus on South India, in the sense they should have focused on South India, but they didn't. If a building fell in South India, I would literally have to call the editor and scream and say, the building is fallen, please take the news, because a mango would have fallen in North India and they would focus on that. So that's how it is. Half the time I felt like I was marketing news. And I was not just a journalist, I had to convince the editors who sat in New Delhi or Bombay, which are the 2 big news centers of India, that the news which is happening in other parts are also equally important. So there was one point in 2012 when I got really tired of this. An Indian nurse called Savita died in Ireland. Now, if you just Google Savita, her death actually made Ireland repeal their anti-abortion law. Ireland has a very strict abortion law. And this Indian nurse, Indian woman actually died in a hospital because they would not let her abort the baby, though it was an unsafe pregnancy. I had all the details. I had interviewed the family, and I'm raring to go. And a politician falls sick in the northern part of India. And so this news would just not make it. And there are protests happening in Ireland, but it wouldn't just get covered. So I think that was my breaking point. I decided I'm going to quit TV journalism and do something different. So I was a mid-career journalist with obviously no money. And I thought the internet is a free space where you can start something, which is why I thought let's focus on South India. I know the topic today is local media, but when we say local, South India has more than 200 million people. It's a huge population. And there are 5 different states now. People speak in 4 different languages. Each state has around 20 newspapers, 20 full-time news channels, and hundreds of websites. So it was not just enough that we become a website which covers South India. We needed to have focus. Of course, I had no plan in the beginning. Like, I did not have a business plan or anything, but it comes over time. I mean, I started the News Minute in 2014. But I realized that the one thing which media houses do not focus on is that there is no female gaze. There is no feminist perspective. Most news organizations are headed by males, and they all have the same gaze on every news story. So it became important to have a news organization that has a female gaze. So all our editorial leaders are women. In fact, this year we took 2 men. I mean, 1 this year and 1 last year, after 8 years. So I'm feeling quite proud that we finally took 2 men. But in India, see, the thing is, it's not just enough that you're inclusive as a newsroom. It's not just about gender. It's not just about women and men. We have something called the caste system in India, which is a social class where people are divided from ancient times into various classes. It is a way of oppression. But there are classes in India who remain outside things like journalism, bureaucracy and all this. It's also important that when you become an inclusive newsroom, you bring these people in. And it's not just enough that you make them reporters, but you need them as editorial decision makers. Mm-hmm. So these are various things that we have gotten into. I mean, as I explain, I feel like it's a bit too much of things we've gotten into, but we just figure it out. I will be saying all this now. By next year, maybe I would have changed the entire plan. That's how things work in journalism, because we started as a feminist organization which looks at South India, But in the last 2-3 years, India has seen a surge in right-wing violence, especially in the state that I report from, which is Karnataka. I live there. So there's a lot of attention on that.
Yeah.
So most of our resources are looking at that kind of oppression and repression. So
Okay, so you have what, newsrooms in each of the state capitals?
yes, we have around 45 people now.
Okay.
Not all are journalists, but they are spread out in the 5 southern states.
Okay.
Yes.
And what are the products? Like, how do you package the news?
So we were into videos quite a bit, and the website, which is the News Minute. But now we want to start doing podcasts and have particular shows. We've realized that it's just not enough doing videos, but you have to create mini brands within the News Minute. For example, people understand there's this journalist who does this show, like how a television channel would behave, right? So we are thinking of doing different things, and also of starting something in languages. We are an English website. But there is a huge population in India which does not read English, understand English, but they are tuned into news in their local languages. And so it becomes important to tap into that market also, not just because it's a market, but in languages, liberal progressive media is much more lesser. The liberal progressive media is very English-centric. So we want to bring it to languages.
Yeah, and just for a moment, staying with this, because I know you're a feminist newsroom. So how does that kind of I guess roll through? What is the kind of how does that impact the kind of stories that you cover, and what is the change that you want to see? Do you feel like you have impact?
So when I say feminist, don't imagine a street protest. I mean, literally in every news you cover. I will give you a small example. There was this woman who killed her husband on the first night of the wedding. And there was a news agency copy which said, woman kills her husband on first night because he was not handsome. So everyone publishes this news because it proves that women are shallow, and that this woman in particular is really shallow, right? Because crime reporters in India are mostly men. So they call up the police station and they say, hello, a murder happened. How did it happen? The policeman will say, this is the complaint. The complaint will say the woman killed because the man wasn't handsome. But the male reporter does not ask, what is her version? Now, her version is that she did not want to get married. Her parents forced her. The man forced himself on her. Therefore, she had to murder him. It could be right or wrong, but the point is there is a perspective. So when you do news, what is the other side of the story? So I am a woman. I have sustained interest in telling stories of other women. Another small, quick example is India is big about its movies. We have so many movie industries. You guys must have watched some Indian movie here or there. And romance is a huge genre in India. What is romance? The hero is behind the girl. For years and years, he's singing, singing, singing. Finally, the woman agrees. That is called stalking in my world, right? So we started writing that. And we wrote about really big heroes saying, boss, you're a stalker. You are not doing romance here. We met with so much of resistance. But the point is, even in pop culture, call out these tendencies. I think we have made a difference. I mean, not just the News Minute, but we have a network of women in media. We come together, we write about these things, we call out these things. It's a lot of energy, but I think it is working.
Yeah, great. Did we get the slides working? I think so. Okay, so tell us a bit more. Back to South Africa and the kind of audience and products. Give us a sort of feeling for the media.
So this is just to give you a sense of the area that I'm talking about, the Eastern Cape. It's not as big as Dhanya's area of 260 million. The Eastern Cape is just 6.6 million people. It's the second biggest province in South Africa, but it is also one of the poorest provinces. We have a lot of issues, just in terms of service delivery, issues around corruption, that sort of make things very difficult. It is known as the home of legends. A lot of you will obviously know these names: Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu, Owa Tambo. So we have all these big names that have come from the Eastern Cape. Beautiful beaches, beautiful coastline. Our main language in the Eastern Cape is isiXhosa, followed by Afrikaans, which is my language, and then English. And just some interesting points. The area that I'm from East London in the Eastern Cape. So one of our major employers there is Mercedes-Benz. So there's a lot of German collaboration with East London. And then, of course, we have Ford and Volkswagen in Gqeberha, the new name. And then sporting talent. I don't know how many people here know rugby, but South Africa won the World Cup, and a lot of those stars are from the Eastern Cape. The captain, some of the big players, Lucanio Mapimpi. So those are all our people. Thank you. And then just to give you a sense of our readership, we are a majority black readership. 83% of our readers are black, followed by 13% white, and then 3% colored. That is my category. And then, as you can see, we have majority women, 53%, followed by men at 47%. A lot of our readers have, 43% of them have a matric certificate, that's grade 12, and 17% have a post-matric qualification. As you can see, a large percentage of our readers are in the 25 to 34 category. One thing that I just need to explain to you about the Eastern Cape, and which makes my job very difficult, we cross over very different areas. So we have metropolitan areas that are very developed, and that's where the newspaper is based. But then we also have a very rural area where people don't have electricity, they don't have water that flow to their homes. There are people, there's a video that went viral in South Africa a couple of weeks ago where people get into a drum and then float down the river so that they can get to a point in order to get services like go to clinics, go to schools, and it's very dangerous. So we have to sort of mix, those two areas, and how do you do both of them justice? So that's my newspaper covers both those areas, and it has been difficult to sort of juggle between the two because you need to do both of them justice. So that's just a snapshot of the province and the area that we cater for.
Okay, thanks. And so now let's switch to Guatemala. And Anna, like the journalism of Ojoconmipisto, is that right? Yes. is really breathtaking in its innovation, right? It's following the spending of local money, so it's really eyes on the money. Is that how you would, explain that? So I think similarly, if you could, really, I guess, set the table. Tell us a bit about the how it operates, the products, who the audience is.
Yes.
Yeah, and you have a few slides, I know.
Thank you. Well, my name is Anna. I'm from Guatemala City. I'm a journalist, and I started working as a journalist around 1980 when we don't have internet and we just have press, radio, and TV. So I changed around 2013, and for me, was a new situation to learn about digital space. So we create this media that is called Ojoconmipisto. In Guatemala, pisto is a slang word to talk about money. So watch my money, watch my taxes, how the government use our taxes. So we decide to create this outlet, and we start working with rural journalists around the city, around the country. So right now we are 6 journalists in the office in Guatemala and this group of journalists. I want to show you this small video that explains our work. Have subtitles in English. Okay. It's not the sound.
You have.
You can read it.
Does the sound work? I think it's okay because it's got the subtitles, right? That's good. It's fine.
Isn't it working now?
Oh, it's not showing at all, the video.
We were showing. Wow,
Okay, not to worry.
sorry.
We'll,
What I want to do there is to show you how we work. We have one space that is called, program that is called Guatemala, where is the platform where all the government and local government publish all what the thing that they buy or the contract they made. So we start looking there, we start digging there the information. And, sorry.
that's okay. And so that video, you saw a little bit of the video, I think, did you? Before it went off? So that video is really directed at the citizens that you are recruiting
Yes.
into the reporting process.
Yes, we do two things in Ojoconmipisto. The first one, we train the reporters from rural areas, because in Guatemala, if you want to be a journalist, most of the time you have to go to the city to study. Just a few years ago, we have some universities in rural areas that teach you to be a journalist. So we work with these persons. We teach them about how to write the story, ethics things, for example, and all the law that is related with the contracts. That's one thing. The second thing is we audit the use of these public funds. And the third thing, we promote the citizen participation. Why? Because we believe two things. First, that if the readers, they have information, they will make a better decision, they will take better decisions, one. And the second one is the readers, they are living in that place. So they will be a better source of information. They are there. So they will call us and tell us what to do, what's going on. Also, not just the journalists that live in the rural areas, also all the neighbors.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you cover, it's municipality by municipality.
Well, Guatemala has 340 municipalities. We tried, but it's not possible. We just are focusing the most important, the one that have the most money that come from the government, from the budget.
Yeah, and so the audience, who is the audience?
Okay, we used to say that we have three types of audience. First one is the local people that lives there. The second one are the authorities, because they follow us and they are what we write, and they are after we publish a story, they start digging what's going on with that problem, for example. And the third one is also the local journalists and the journalists from another medias. What happens in Guatemala? The national media, they covers what's going on in the city. In the city, you have the head of the government, the Congress, the judicial system, and the president. But if you want to know what's going on with the majors of these rural areas, you go and see what we publish in Ojoconmipisto. And there's another thing. We also make tools to the people. So the tools, everything that we learn as a journalist, we show the people how to use them also. For example, they can go to this platform, Ojoconmipisto, and look for information, that's one thing. And we also have archives in our website, so people can go there and look for the information related with the government, with the local government. So that's a way that we keep in touch with the people that follow us.
And with the stories, so, I mean, do you get many tips? Like, is it very often that a citizen will call you up?
Yes.
Or?
Well, that's interesting because we have email, redaccion@ojoconmipisto.com, but people, they most of the time, they call us or they send a message through Facebook. That's the most common. First one is Facebook. The second one is Twitter, where we get the information. And the other thing is that the local people go and look for these reporters and tell them what's going on. So then the reporter calls us to the office, and when I have this story, how can we can write it, how and where we have to start.
So they might say, look, I can see that the local government is spending a money, or they have their family member as a contractor, or
That's became, well, sometimes when you talk to the people they don't realize what the type of information they have. So when they start talking to you and telling you their story, you can tell them you have their facts. They have a lot of information. So when we contrast all the information and we can verify them, we're going to publish. We have one rule in our website. You can call me and give me information, but until I can confirm that, we can confirm that we're going to publish, and we're going to be responsible for what we're going to publish in our website. So, for example, if one reporter from rural area, he wrote a story and the mayor get angry with him, the mayor, if he want to fight, he won't fight with the journalist. He will have to fight with us, with Ojoconmipisto, with the media, not with the journalists. For us, that is important, because it's not the same thing working in the city that when you work in rural areas. When you work in the city, you have all the protection of another colleagues, and also, well, the city is big, but not as big as these two, but it's big, and so you can get lost there. But that doesn't happen when you live in rural areas. Everybody knows you. So that's why we tell them, if you have any problem, it's not with you, it's with us. We, as a media, we're going to support everything, and we're going to find anything you need, you come with us.
Yeah, and it's interesting that, you know, as you say, that you know, a part of your audience are the local authorities themselves, right? The local councils, local municipalities. And I wonder, like, how do you measure the impact? Like, do you feel, like, I mean, because you have the big national media covering national corruption, right? So, but I guess you're finding lots of small corruption.
Yes. Well, that's interesting. People used to think that the big corruption is just in the city. But the problem is that the big corruption is also in the local areas. Why? Because there's the budget. The local government, they don't have to do nothing to get that money. They give it because by law. The law says how much they have to receive according to the amount of people they have. So the thing is that we start telling the people that these things that you look, they are not normal. And many times they answer you, they tell you, this is used to be in that way. So why we have to talk about that? So that's why it's important to talk them and to explain them what's wrong. And what's the other thing is the price of the corruption. We don't have water in home, why? The bridge is not working, why? They pay them, for example, there was one place that is called Ixcan. It's indigenous place of Quiché, and was also, when we have the war, this area was have a lot of problems. Okay, and you start digging and you find that the government in 2013, the budget was 5 million quetzales. They looked for a loan for 17 million quetzales, and they didn't pay it. Now, today, the local government have to pay 64 million quetzales, and is the amount, the total amount of their budget. So you have to explain the people the price of the corruption. That is one of our fights.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so all really different, different sort of models and missions. Let's talk a little bit now about how do we sustain it? What's the kind of business model? Maybe starting with you, Dhanya. I mean, how do you make it work? What's the mix?
Okay, so assuming that some of the people listening may want to set up a media house at some point of time, I think the first thing that smaller media organizations have to understand is that you are very different from the legacy media. You cannot replicate, and you should not think of replicating what they do. For example, can you start a publication in the US or the UK and think of competing with the New York Times or the Guardian or the Washington Post, unless, of course, a billionaire is going to fund you immediately. But if you're going to start a small media house, do not imagine that you are going to replicate the same work. So what is the work that you're going to do? Are you going to write about a particular community like you do? Or are you going to be investigating corruption? Or what is your gaze going to be? You decide on what is going to be your area of interest. It can be small, but the problem with that is also sustainability. For example, if I'm going to write about a population of 20 million people, at the end of the day, only 1 lakh or a very small percentage is going to read me, right? So how do I make revenue out of it? So it's important that you write about a smaller community or you have a niche. For example, we have websites in India which are very science-oriented. They look at climate change, environment. There is a website called The Wire, which is very political. They are highly political, but they also look at the environment. There is one called News Laundry. From the name, you know, it's news and laundry. It basically tells you the dirty laundry of other media houses. So that is their business model. So look at what is your business model. And once you have that figured, and it may not happen immediately, but once you have it figured, remember 2 things, consistency and credibility. Consistency is both in the news you cover, what you cover, and what are the stories you tell. For example, I came from television. Most of my colleagues came from television. In the first 1 or 2 years, we were behaving like that. We would just go breaking news. And then we realized you cannot replicate TV on the web. You don't have to break every news. I mean, somebody will be breaking it anyways. So even if I break a news story, I can do it 10 minutes later, but I'm sure that nothing is wrong about it, that no one can fact check me later and say, that story you broke is wrong. So consistency and cover issues which matter to you. For example, at the News Minute, as I explained, what happens to women and children is very important to us. So we cover that quite a bit. And we have a female gaze. And once you are consistent, we write about caste, which again I explained. It's a social oppression in India. So there are certain topics that we write consistently on. And when you do that over a period of time, the audience will immediately attach credibility to you. That's something you cannot buy. No matter what you do, it's for the reader, the consumer, to decide that, yes, they are credible. There is a section who will never believe you. You cannot convince those people. I mean, we are in a very polarized world where if I say this is black and this is white, and it is black and white, but there is a section which will tell me this is white and this is black, because they don't believe what I say. So we are not here to convert people into believers. We are here to report stories, tell facts, and leave it to the audience. But consistently over a period of time, if you do that, the audience will understand that they may not agree with you. They may think you're biased, you're not neutral. I mean, I don't believe any journalist is neutral or unbiased. That's a different discussion. But at least they know that you're credible and you're consistent. So I think those are business models that we have to build on. Yeah. And then the money and the revenue has to come in.
So, and you have a mix of advertising, and I know you're thinking about changing that. Advertising, you do consultancies, trainings, events. But I think, there's so much talk about this, well, not so much talk, the kind of like, I guess the new revenue model that seems to be working is reader revenues. But the reality, of course, is that that's not going to work for all communities, because not all communities can afford to pay. So, but you have found from your community, which is big enough, and as you say, your journalism has a certain niche and attraction, that you've been able to build audience revenue. So from a membership model, can you just tell us a little bit, because I know that's been a journey.
Yes.
Right, and what have you learnt?
So in India, we have around 10 to 15 big, in the sense big as in just as big as the News Minute, 40 to 45, maximum 60 staff members, around 10 to 15. And almost all of us depend on audience revenue. But I think there is going to be a fatigue setting in around 2 or 3 years, because how many websites will a person pay for? And people are used to reading news free. So to actually make them pay is very difficult. But we are all experimenting with it. There have been some very successful models, and we are struggling. We are still struggling with it, but some months we do well, some months we don't do well. So it's not constant. The other things that we do is, of course, we have ads on the site, which is really disturbing in the sense to even look at, but we can't not do without it. But by August, we are hoping to remove all ads. There are other models of revenue, like you conduct events. Thanks to the pandemic, that has stopped. for the last 2 years. We are hoping to restart it again. We did a 1-year training course with a specific police force on how to deal with trafficking. So we tied up with an NGO, and there is a big city called Hyderabad in India. So we train the policemen, the policewomen there on how to deal with trafficking. So these are things, we work with a lot of hospitals. So there are a lot of revenue models. But the end of the day, I am just a journalist. I'm not an entrepreneur. I mean, in my mind, I don't classify myself as an entrepreneur. I have other people looking after that section. And it's not a rosy picture. It is very difficult to fund media in India. The government has brought in a lot of regulations. For example, the Open Media Foundation, if you take money from them,
OSF, yes.
the OSF, sorry, Open Society, you get abused, trolled.
Yeah.
And when I went for another event of the International Press Institute, I realized that that's the problem world over. That you take funding and then you are abused over that funding. You're anti-national, you took this money, you took that money. And now the government has brought in regulations. So it is not easy.
Yeah.
But
And one of those regulations is restricting like regular credit card payments, right?
yes.
Which is causing a lot of media
Yes,
troubles. in
recurring
media.
payments, it does not auto-renew. I mean, can you imagine how crazy that is? You have to go back to each reader and say, hello, your subscription is over, can you please subscribe again? And there is a cap for foreign funding,
Yeah.
26%, I think. So there are a lot of regulations the government has brought in.
And like the issue about what communities can afford to pay, I know is something that you're both grappling with, right? Anna, can I ask you first of all, with the, at the moment your mix is primarily philanthropy and about 10% like contracts and other trainings. So how do you think about philanthropy? Like, I mean, what are the responsibilities for donors in, say, the circumstances of the kind of journalism that you're doing? And I mean, I wonder also, like, I mean, it's really a social good. It's a service, if you like. Should the government be paying? Like, should there be a tax or something that pays for this monitoring of the government spending?
Okay. When we started the project, we went and talked with businessmen, with people that support another media, and asked them to support us. And everybody told us, wow, it's a good work, keep going, but that's all. They don't want to match the brand with anti-corruption. And the other thing is, the corruption really is digging too big, is going to the roots. And it's a problem. So we start asking for international grants, and we have the support of them. I used to say that I won't knock a door of international grant if I don't believe or I don't what they do. Because if I look for someone else and I don't believe in what they do, it's wrong. So from the moment we have all these few grants, we are working since the beginning. When we start, we have, for example, a grant from USAID, and it keeps us working for 3 months. And after that, we start working by our own, but at that moment, it was just me and then another reporter. And in 2019, we got our most important in that moment was with Open Society and with NED. And after that, we are working with EVOS also. EVOS, Open Society, NED, EVOS, Internews, Chicas Poderosas, Fundamedios, different sources in that way. When you said that, for example, I think in other countries, the government, when they have the official ads, they give to the media, but they are expecting that you won't write about them. And when you start writing against what government are making, they try to push you and to be quiet. And at that moment, in Guatemala, we have that problem with the other medias. And we have one discussion in between us if we're gonna agree to have the local government's publicity, but we are not sure about that. Right now, we have our 90% of our budget comes from the grants, And the 10%, we have an office called Laboratorio de Medios that is the owner of Ojoconmipisto, if we say it that way. And with Laboratorio de Medios, we give consultants, we give trainings, we make certificates with universities, and also institutional communication. So that in that way, we get money to support Ojoconmipisto. We were talking before that, and if we're thinking to charge a membership, for example, to the reader from Ojoconmipisto, not in this moment. We want to find the money through Laboratorio de Medios, the company. Thank you.
And Cheri, so you're kind of really trying to transition a legacy media, right, and move people from print product is still the main subscription space, and South Africa is not a place where people are used to paying. You've told me. I mean, so how are you moving them to digital subscriptions? What kind of strategies are you using?
Okay, so as you all know, it's very difficult to be in the newspaper industry because everyone does see it as a dying media. But what is not dying is the fact that there is this need for reliable news source, and that is really what our focus is. So just to give you a sense of our main source of revenue, so about 80% of our revenue does come from our advertising, and even though we have a love-hate relationship sometimes with authorities and with government, they are actually a large contributor to our advertising revenue. A couple of years ago, it was more a 60-40 split, where it was 60 in terms of advertising and 40 from circulation or readership. But we, just before lockdown happened, the pandemic, we were actually on a very soft basis. We were trying to get people to move over to a paywall system where we actually get them to pay for news. Because again, we are dealing with the challenge of we've always given all the news for free. And now suddenly we're telling people, oh, remember what we gave you for free last year? We now want you to pay for it. And it's just trying to change people's mindsets. And this is where our hyperlocal strategy really comes into play, because people can read national news anywhere. It's freely available. But what we are trying to do is to give people content that relates to them. Campaign journalism, the investigative journalism, which I spoke about earlier, and just really getting to the bread and butter issues, which is a core part of what we do. So we have, then lockdown happened, and with that, we actually opened up our paywall system because it was the pandemic. There was a lot of misinformation and disinformation about the virus going around. So we felt it was our responsibility for people to be able to access news that was reliable and news that they could trust. And in the last year, we have really pushed our local content and putting that sort of content behind the paywall. And we are slowly but surely, the numbers are not there yet, but we are slowly but surely seeing the shift where our readers are actually engaging and signing up for our content online, to read the local stories. So, that has been a learning curve for us, and we are pushing with this. Like I said, the numbers are small, but we are seeing that little uptick in the print circulation in our digital subscriptions, because our packages aren't just, yes, you can go onto our website or, and get the news on an e-edition, but we also have various packages where we include our print edition. And we are part of a larger group in South Africa, so you have the Sunday Times newspaper, which is a big newspaper in our stable. We've got Business Day, Financial Mail. So we sort of have all these packages where you could have access to those sources of news as well. So it's been interesting, but we just chip away at it every single day. And if you look at our stats, so we review our stats daily as an editorial team, but weekly as the management team of the newspaper, where we look at what are the things people are talking about, and without fail, our top 10 stories will be local stories. our top 10 subscriber stories, or what entice people to click on subscribing to the paper, it's local. And we've seen that work, and that is a model that we are pushing. So yeah, that's, what we have sort of positioned ourselves as being a reliable source of local news.
Yeah, okay.
Or challenge and combats.
I think disinformation is a huge issue. I don't know in your countries how it is, but in India, WhatsApp is big. So, for example, I think I was in some 15 family groups, 20 friends groups, 30 groups. I have no clue who runs it, but people just randomly add you to groups. And from good morning messages, they will send you these memes in the morning, like a tulip flower or something saying good morning. It starts from that. So people literally live on WhatsApp. And the thing that they do the entire day is to send fake news. And that's something which affects journalists also. Like people in my office, including myself, I would sometimes just forward something without checking. I mean, it sounds so realistic, right? It sounds so realistic that people just forward it. The last 2-3 weeks, we have had this huge controversy in India. I've been reading up that Britain had it. Many other countries have it on the halal food which Muslims prepare. The halal meat which is made according to Islamic traditions. So there is a huge misinformation going on, again in the state that I come from, Karnataka, where they want a ban on this halal food because they are saying that according to Islamic traditions, some of the Muslims spit into the food. And they've got these shots from some weird eatery where somebody would have just blown into something. And that's just spread through WhatsApp. So what does halal mean? Halal means spitting into food, which it is not. So how do you dispel that disinformation? I personally believe that we are only a drop in the ocean. That is all the media houses put together, the kind of fake news busting that we do, it's only scratching the surface. Because if 10 million people are getting the forwards on WhatsApp, only 500,000 are actually reading fact checks. So in India at least, fact checking has to become much, much bigger and in different languages. It cannot be just in English or Hindi, which is one of the other main languages. It has to be in every regional language, or we are not going to make a difference.
But is that how you see it? Is it only...
Is it really about fact checking, or is there a bigger role in the way that you think about the daily work of the News Minute?
I mean, it is like for example, a small example, the Home Minister of the state said yesterday, so another controversy, everything is to do with Muslims because last 2-3 weeks it has been that they should not wear the headscarf or the hijab. So there has been a controversy. And so everything is around Muslims in India. So 2 days ago, a young man was killed in a road rage accident. But the Home Minister of the state comes and says that the guy could not speak in Urdu, which is a language spoken by many Muslims in India, which is why he was murdered. It's the Home Minister. How do you fact check him? Finally, the police department fact checked him. That's a department he controls. So it's a daily process. And when the misinformation comes from the government itself, and there are people who will believe it no matter what fact check you do. But you cannot be tired of that, right? We have to just be consistent about it, keep doing it, hoping that there are at least a few people who would believe in that fact check.
What's it like in the East Cape?
In the Eastern Cape. Do you know, we don't have a lot of those instances, but sometimes we do have ignorance from the public. But I will touch base on a topic we had last week. So one of our local universities, we got this internal memo about qualifications that aren't registered. So people who had graduated from certain courses technically aren't recognized. And so we published the first story, but I mean, the work that we put into it was thorough. We had documents from internal sources. We spoke to various people who were close to the story. Yet, when that story went out on social media, there was massive backlash. People who were sort of saying that was fake news. We were spreading misinformation, and people were threatening to burn down our building. But we kept at it. We wrote a series of articles as the information came out. At the end of the day, the stuff that we had written about was actually found to be true. After 5 days of basically harassing the institution to get us comment. But, those were the things that we were dealing with. It's like ignorance from people who are saying that what we are putting out there is fake news, even though you have a massive amount of information that you put out there. And when we have those instances, we actually take the story from behind the paywall and we say to them, read it so that you can educate yourself.
Okay, interesting. Anna?
Well, we just work when they send us the information to us and it's misinformation there. So then we start digging, and when we have the answer, we publish that. But the thing that we promote in Ojoconmipisto is to teach the people. We always ask them, where's the source? And if you find something that they don't have the source, ignore them. So just like that.
That's interesting. Okay, we've just got a few minutes. One question. When you're responsible for covering such a large area, I mean, you all are actually, so I don't know, we don't have much time. How do you reach underserved communities? Who would like to take that? How do you reach underserved communities?
How do you reach?
Yeah.
I mean, I can say very quickly that for us, it's a language barrier. The underserved communities, for example, people whose stories that we write about, a lot of them do not read English, or they are not the English news consumers. So what happens is, I worked in a newspaper once for a brief period of time, and the editor used to say that the people who read my newspapers are the ones who play golf. So therefore, the news should cater to them, which is, if they open the newspaper, it should look beautiful and presentable, and there's happy news. There's no negative stuff about people living in slums or poverty. So the point is, as journalists, that's not our job. We have to write about the people who are suffering, but most times they are not the ones who are reading it. In India, the problem is the language barrier. Maybe you would have the same issue because you have different languages, and I don't know if everyone reads English.
Yeah,
Very briefly, we've got 2 minutes.
No, it's the same issue. Like I was saying, we're an English medium newspaper, but we have isiXhosa is our main language. So when there were instances where if there's a story that we want to reach a particular audience, we've actually done things like to Xhosa headlines, that's the native language, and also posters. But that is if it's a story that's specifically aimed at that group. So a couple of years ago, they were looking for people who were eligible for a particular fund, and there were thousands of people. And we knew who those people were, and they weren't the English readers that we were catering for. So we did a specific headline and poster in their native language in order to reach that audience. And to be honest, I'm really hoping that going forward, we do more of that, because it is a dominant language, and even though it's English medium, we should be reaching out to our people.
And I know that you've done stuff on vaccines and for the indigenous
in Guatemala we
communities.
have Spanish is the official language, and 22 different from indigenous. And also one indigenous language, if you go to another department, they talk in a different way. At that moment, we just working in Spanish, and we want to look for a project to all the stories just to translate, not to translate, because you can't translate it, just to interpret what the story is, tell them, not in the 22, 4 are the most important, in this is in like a small radios, something like that. That's what we want to do. And we just work one special investigation related with the vaccine. And Guatemala is at the top of Central America. And one of the reasons is because all the government, all the social system give the information in Spanish. So when you go to the rural areas, they don't understand what's going on. So that's this one example, and we want to avoid that. Not in this moment, we don't have the resource, but that's one thing that we want to work.
Okay, thanks. Thank you very much to our panelists, Cheri, Anna, and Dhanya. Thank you very much for coming. If you would like to know more about IPI, we're the global network of editors, journalists, and media builders. And if you want to know more about these media, then we have case studies on our website that's been part of this research and sort of sharing program that we've been working on for the past 18 months. So you can find a lot there. It's ipi.media. Pretty simple. Okay, thanks very much for coming.
Thank you.